and gentlemen, dear colleagues, first of all I would like to thank the scientific committee for the opportunity to contribute the paper to this session on geographic information systems. It is with great pleasure that I offer a brief methodological insight into the current use of GIS in a research project in the field of provincial Roman archaeology. My dissertation project at the University of Basel, entitled Augusta Raurica, Insula 30, is the first time that GIS is being employed from the very start of the post-excavation analysis at Augusta Raurica. The project has allowed me to gather valuable experience both in making available voluminous excavation documentation and in handling this data using ArcGIS software. In my paper, I would like to illustrate possibilities which GIS offers and procedures for using it with selected examples. The presentation is divided into 6 sections. In archaeology, as in other fields, the use of geographic information systems has become more and more widespread since the beginning of the 1990s. Such systems have now become a permanent feature of various areas of research, not just for managing archaeological geodata, but for actually providing answers to specific research questions. The areas where it's used in practice include, for example, mapping, density calculation, spatial analysis, coast surface analysis, ongoing data management during excavations, and assisting with heritage site management. Here, however, I would like to concentrate on one particular case study from the Roman town of Augusta Raurica. Once part of the northwest provinces of the Roman Empire, this Roman colonial town lies in the center of Europe, some 10 kilometers east of Basel, in Switzerland. Augusta Raurica was founded by Lucius Manatius Glaucus in 44-43 BC. It was situated at an extremely important transport node where several bridges crossed the river Rhine. The perimeter of the city enclosed an area of around 100 hectares, of which, from the available evidence, about 60 hectares was built up. Augusta Raurica remained the largest and most important settlement in the region for approximately 300 years. From a topographical point of view, the town was built on 2 levels. The so-called Oberstadt, or Upper Town, with the town center, was located on a plateau between the rivers Erbolz and Biolenbach. Towards the north, the plateau sloped down towards the Rhine Valley, where the Unterstadt, or Lower Town, was located and where the Castrum Albacense was constructed from around AD 300 onwards. Augusta Raurica is famous not only for one of the best preserved Roman theatres north of the Alps, but also, and in particular, for the late antique silver treasure discovered at Kaiseraugst, one of the most important silver finds from the ancient world. Although in Augusta Raurica has been excavated and studied since the Renaissance, the history of GIS in Augusta Raurica is relatively recent. It developed out of a CAD-supported excavation inventory, where a large proportion of excavations in the Augusta Raurica area have been digitally recorded since the 1990s. We were able to combine the GIS data with the attribute data of the archaeological database Indus-Pro, and we were working with the GIS platform ArcGIS. Since early 2013, the archaeological overall plan of Augusta Raurica has been part of GeoView BL, the new online interactive map of Canton Basel-Landschaft. Before we turn to the project itself, a brief clarification of terminology. The term insula is generally used to mean a block of houses enclosed by nautical street grids. It may consist of several independent housing units. In the case of Insula 30, the block measures 60 on 50 meters. Centrally situated in the upper town of Augusta Raurica, the block known as Insula 30 was completely excavated between 1959 and 1962. Although multiple building projects throughout the second half of the 20th century gave rise to rescue excavation in a great many areas of the Roman town. Insula 30 is so far the only insula to have been excavated in its entirety. Despite the fact that it is now 55 years since the excavation took place, the insula has never been subject of a comprehensive analysis. Almost the entire area of 3,400 square meters was excavated down to the underlying natural, allowing not only the floor plans of the stone-built phases of the town, but also the remains of the timber-built phase of the early 1st century AD to be recorded. As a result, the insula represents an extremely valuable archaeological source with great research potential. Some outstanding discoveries were made during the various excavation campaigns, including the gladiator mosaic in the dining room and the Mediterranean-type kitchen adjoining it. In 2012, I embarked on a study of Insula 30 as the subject of my dissertation project at the chair of Minorista at the University of Basel. Because the scope of the project was so large, a pragmatic research strategy was needed. From the start, it was clear that I would have to explore new methodological approaches to allow me to create a single comprehensive record of all the finds and future uncovered in these early excavations. A fundamental challenge when analyzing the results of archaeological excavations is finding the most efficient way of making available the numerous data and source materials. After the excavation, documentation has been initially tidied and archived. It can often be years, sometimes even decades, before it is studied and analyzed in detail. This means that information on the finds, futures and excavation results must first be brought together in a readily available form. It is particularly difficult for a researcher who has not been personally involved in an excavation to link up archive materials stored separately according to media type. It is crucial when analyzing excavation results to be able to establish the spatial relationships between structures and then to characterize each structure, using every available source of information. Depending on what you want to discover about a particular feature, the required sources will be stored in quite different locations within the site archive. To work efficiently, you will therefore need a strategy which, with the least possible effort, will provide you with an overview of the extensive excavation documentation. Traditional well-tried solutions include, for example, creating lists and concordances and photocopying and patching together drawings and photographs. Using these, you can eventually work out plans to various construction phases. In the end, once the analysis is complete, these are digitalized using drawing software and finally published. For the analysis of Insula 30, the procedure I'm using turns the traditional working method on its head. All the structures recorded in the original documentation were entered into Augusta Raurica's geographic information system at the very outset, by scanning the original records and then georeferencing them using the GIS software. The various components of the documentation were thus digitalized before the actual evaluation itself began. The task of producing drawings, including ongoing adjustment and correction, is thus done by the researcher himself. As a result, there is no need to prepare provisional sketches by hand and patch together individual drawings. At the same time as the data for the structural features are being entered into the spatial database, lists are generated using the so-called attribute tables. Thanks to the GIS facility to link these lists directly with the spatial information, the data can then be used in very versatile ways for different types of searches. Also, once the structural features have been input into the GIS, the scale plans can be produced at any time and almost at the touch of a button. The strategy I have chosen not only saves the laborious reworking and incorporation of provisional plans, but also, and more importantly, builds up within the GIS database which will form the basis for the evaluation. Instead of the knowledge accumulated above individual structural features only being input into the GIS at the end of the research project, It is added as the work progresses so that the data set is constantly growing. For the researcher, the GIS software serves not just as an instrument for analysis, but first and foremost as a working tool. In addition, the basic plans accumulated in the GIS and the huge wealth of information stored in the attribute tables are both immediately available and constantly updated for use by the research community. I would now like to give a step-by-step illustration of some of the procedures for using the working tool and some of the application it offers. Right at the start, all the excavation drawings were scanned into the GIS, georeferenced and vectorized. At the same time, supplementary data were entered in so-called attribute tables. An overall map of all excavated and documented features was thus created. This forms the basis for the analysis and can be constantly updated with further information from the database as the work proceeds. For example, construction phases can be allocated to the mapped structures. It is from the GIS attribute tables that the essential data for the analysis are added to the spatial information. The countless details of data, assignments, measurements, and remarks in the attribute tables can be searched at any time or used to generate maps of various types. For archaeological analysis, it is essential to determine the spatial locations of the individual features documented in the excavation records. This is indispensable if the various sources of information are to be linked up. For example, the positions from which photographs were taken during the excavation can be mapped in the GIS and linked directly with scans of the photographs themselves. Clicking on a photo spot on the map will thus open the corresponding photograph in a separate window. There is no need to spend time hunting for the analog photograph in the archive folder. The same technique can be used for section plans. Clicking on the design section opens a dialog box where you can select either the section drawing or its description. In the specific case of Insula 30, it was important to discover whether the site had in fact been excavated right down to the underlying natural across its entire area. In order to check this, I entered in the GIS all the locations where the upper surface of the natural appeared in section drawings and the depth and width at which it was recorded. By interpolation of these data, I was able to create the three-dimensional model of the area. This not only confirmed that practically the entire area had been excavated down to the natural, but also allowed me to generate an impression of the topography as it was in Roman times. If you superimpose the overall plan over the topographical model and then apply vertical exaggeration to the individual structures, the result, with very little effort, is a three-dimensional model of Insula 30. The GIS system offers exciting possibilities for analyzing not only features but also finds. Whereas mapping finds assemblages from early excavations in Augusta Raurica used to be a rather laborious procedure, with GIS it becomes a fascinating process, thanks especially to the many different ways in which the stored information can be used. Once you have entered them in the GIS, it is a simple method to search for assemblages to finds. For example, from their upper and lower boundaries, the volumes of find complexes can be calculated. From these, in turn, interesting and revealing density maps can be created. In themselves, of course, density maps are nothing new. I simply use these as an example of how easily and quickly data in the GIS can be used for additional investigations. In the last part of my lecture, I would like to look ahead briefly at the next steps which my project entails and at questions I will be trying to answer partly with the help of GIS. In the process of digitizing the excavation documentation, all the features documented in surface drawings were entered in the GIS. In the first step, I projected all the structures which had only been recorded in sections and, in particular, the floors onto a horizontal plane. The result was a complete overall plan. On the basis of this plan, I'm now at the stage of working out the construction phases, adding my results continually to the attribute tables. Right from the period of the earliest wooden structures, evidences of the Roman plots within the Insula can be seen. The same is true of the later stone structures. Certain walls appear to follow the same building lines, maintaining these subdivisions over the centuries. How far conclusions can be drawn from this about the ownership structure is still to be determined. Besides the architectural history, functional interpretation of the room is of particular interest. Even before the excavation records were analyzed, statements could be made based on the architectural features and structural fittings of particular room units. An imposing entrance flanked by columns once led into a peristyle or inner courtyard surrounded on three sides by a colonnade. Immediately opposite the entrance portal is a magnificent dining room which was furnished with the gladiator mosaic I mentioned earlier. Adjoining it to the south is a further dining room with a hypocaust or on-the-floor heating system which could be fired from the neighboring kitchen. At the southern end of the peristyle there are 4 rooms of equal size, of which one could also be heated and was decorated with a mosaic floor. The similarity of these rooms suggests that they may have been guest rooms. On the other side of the courtyard is a magnificent bath with suggestions of at least 4 heated rooms. The exact functions of these rooms are still to be determined. The same is true of the small rooms to the north of the large dining room. These may have contained a small private bath, which surprisingly projects out into the portico, something very rarely seen. Finally, the large room in the southeastern corner of the Insula could be identified as a bronze workshop. Distinctive fittings such as accumulations of hearths combined with other indicators suggest the existence of workshops. Hearths are especially frequent in the rooms along the eastern facade, as well as at all 4 corners of the Insula. These rooms opening outwards onto the porticos and streets beyond would be ideal sites for workshops and businesses. In some cases, these rooms would certainly also have served as simple living quarters for the artisans and shopkeepers. Alongside the functional interpretation of individual rooms, another question to be addressed is the overall interpretation of the Insula 30 as an interconnected whole. The luxurious fitting out of the central building complex with bathing facilities, heated rooms, mosaics and wall paintings in such contrast with its local surroundings and the probability that in the final stages of its construction most of it was under single ownership suggests an interpretation as an urban domus or villa of a member of the upper class. Whether the owner of the domus was actually a private person or whether, as has previously been suggested, the complex was the headquarters of the corporation will hopefully have been clarified by the end of the ongoing analysis. A possible clue may be the large mosaic with its prominent representations of gladiators. This, together with the discovery of a sword-like thrusting weapon and associated find of a bronze statuette of Mars, has led to much speculation that there may be some connection with gladiators. For the time being, however, the question of ownership remains unresolved. Once the analysis of the Insula 30 has been completed, the focus of the project will broaden out to include the Insula's urban context. Its central location in the so-called upper town of Augusta Raurica and its vicinity to the town's main arteries and public buildings, such as the central baths, indicate its prominent status in the context of the town. The only insula in Augusta Raurica have been completely excavated so far, therefore offers an ideal starting point for approaching questions of town planning. Of course, GIS will be a perfect analytical tool for this purpose. To conclude my lecture, I would like to summarize briefly the most important points and findings regarding the methods of analysis using GIS. The examples I have given show that an analysis supported by GIS, especially in the case of excavations with mainly analog documentation, for example old excavations, brings many advantages. Of course, the amount of data available from older excavations does not usually reach the levels generated by an excavation today. Nevertheless, the documentation offers a wealth of information in various analog media. Digitizing the records and integrating them into the GIS system allows the potential of all excavation documentation to be much better and more efficiently exploited. As a spatial database, the geographic information system allows large quantities of data to be quickly assessed, especially for researchers who have not been personally involved in an excavation. This provides a relatively quick way of obtaining a spatial overview. Individual sources of information, such as photographs and drawings, are linked with one another and can be located in 3 dimensions. The GIS can be used at any time to search for information, even while data is still being entered, but especially during the actual work of analysis. The whole treasury of data stored in the attribute tables is available to be searched or to generate maps of every type. Finally, an essential aspect of this method of analysis is the continuing usefulness on many levels. Apart from the return on investment for the researcher himself, which I have illustrated, other researchers also benefit. Digitally captured sources and data stored in the GIS are readily, transparently and reproducibly available for anyone in the research community to use for his or her own investigations and to supplement with further data. Even though the advantages of the method illustrated here are undoubtedly convincing, there still remains the question of whether the return justifies the investment. Whether using GIS makes sense or not must be decided on a case-by-case basis, depending on the size of the excavation to be evaluated and questions to be answered. If a project involves studying relationships between excavation results from across a large area, an entire insula, in this example, GIS will always be a huge and lasting asset. It is important to stress that archaeological results are evaluated in exactly the same way when you are using GIS. The skills involved in the archaeological principles which underlie them remain unchanged. The intellectual process of identifying and interpreting features is still the job of the archaeologist. The GIS does not absolve researchers of the responsibility of making decisions. On the contrary, it explicitly demands that they do so. An archaeological evaluation using GIS offers an attractive alternative to traditional methods. In the end, however, every researcher must decide for him or herself whether it represents a feasible approach for the project and research questions involved. The success of the method selected for the pilot project on Insula 30 can only be finally judged once the analysis is complete. GIS opens up new prospects not only as a working tool for archaeology in general, but in particular as an aid for the efficient and ongoing evaluation of excavation results.